Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Hello again, how are you? I'm Martin Ballard, and if you're late to the party, this is episode 41 of this podcast series from one of the biggest producers of pantomime and children's theatre in the UK.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Last time we heard from many of the guests who have featured in the first 40 episodes, talking about their first memories of pantomime, their favourite titles, and why the genre is so important to them. Now don't worry if you are late to the party and you missed any of the previous episodes with creatives, actors or behind the scenes tours of Imagine Theatre, you can still catch up with them all. They are all still available, and don't forget to subscribe to the series so that you don't miss out in the future. Now this time I've been joined by the performer, choreographer and casting consultant who also hosts workshops and masterclasses for students and industry professionals, and he's the creator and founder of Nottingham Musical Theatre Associates. He is Graeme Pickering. How are you, Graeme?
I'm good, thanks, Martin. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Tell us a bit about your background first of all, and what first inspired you to become a performer?
So I've always loved theatre. When I was younger, I used to do a lot more music originally. That's how I kind of got into theatre, where I used to have piano lessons and I used to play all different instruments and go to singing choirs and things like that. And then from that, I used to do amateur dramatics and just loved, going to the theatre with my family and watching shows and obviously doing it as a hobby. And then it wasn't until maybe my teenage years when a teacher of mine said, I think you should take this a bit more seriously and have a bit more formal dance classes, because a lot of the dance I was doing was more just theatre dance, so it was just more for fun rather than anything that was technique based or following a syllabus. So I thought, okay, I'll go and do this and see if I like it or not, and I loved it even more. And then followed the path through into going on to college and working, and then through there I've worked as a professional dancer and performer in all variety of shows, whether that be, on land in the UK with doing some tours, or whether it be on cruise ships or overseas. And then in the more recent years, when I say recent years, maybe the last 9 years, so not that recently, I've moved more into the creative world of things, and I love that because I still love to perform inside. I think anyone that's a performer always has that excitement in them about performing, but I love to create and watch performers use my material or use feedback I've given in a rehearsal room and seeing them thrive with it and putting their own interpretation onto it, and that really inspires me. So this is the new generation of where I am now, if that makes sense, the new era.
So you mentioned the teacher that said you should perhaps take dance more seriously, but was there any other inspiration as a child? Was there any form of entertainment in the family? Were any of your parents or other siblings, for instance, performers?
Actually not. My mum always says, I don't know where you came from, because no one else is that way in the family. However, my parents love the theatre, and they still now regularly go on a Friday evening to our local theatre and see whatever's on, go for dinner and then watch the show, and they've always loved that. And I think, they've always really supported the theatre, even though they're not in the theatre themselves. I know we're talking on a podcast for Imagine Theatre, which is about panto, so it sounds quite cliche, but however, we used to go to the pantomime every year from the age of 4, every single Christmas, and I used to always be wowed by what I'd see, and then come home and kind of be reenacting the numbers and talking about it for ages, and just being that excitable child, and just innocently performing to myself. And then I think from that, my mum and dad had seen, I think he's got a bit of a talent for performing and, showing off a little bit. So let's see about taking him to lessons. And it started with music, and then it just progressed from there. And then as it happens, it evolved over time more into the dance theatre realm rather than music. But I do feel like the grounding and understanding and foundations of the fundamentals of music have been so helpful to me throughout my career, because we all know that, the skills are so interlinked. I always say to any student I'm teaching now or something, I always say, even if you're just a dancer, you need to be taking acting lessons. Go and learn about music. You never know, it really does help you. And also, if you work in a creative realm, you're going to be collaborating with musical directors or people like that, and you need to be able to understand their terminology and their language as well. So that's basically my journey from childhood to today.
Do you remember the first pantomime you ever saw, and where would that have been?
It was at the Nottingham Playhouse, and it was Cinderella. So it was a rep theatre pantomime, and I remember just falling in love with it. And it was very traditional, had all the elements of what a traditional panto would have, and it was just high energy, really fun. Had a lot of original music, but also pop music of the time, and I really just loved the magic of it and the escapism. And I used to always find that, my mum used to always say, we used to go on the 27th of December every year when we were that age, and Mum used to say that was her Christmas day, because she always used to be so busy on Christmas Day cooking the dinner and the run up to it, getting all the presents ready and blah 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 blah, that she was always ready to relax after the Christmas days were over. And she used to say the 27th was her Christmas Day, where we used to go and have a nice meal out, and then we'd go to the pantomime, and it was lovely, and we did it every single year.
Of course, you were lucky in Nottingham, because there are two major pantomimes every year: the Theatre Royal, perhaps more commercial, the Playhouse more of a rep panto, and the tradition at the Playhouse is incredible. Kenneth Allen Taylor, of course, started that tradition as writer, director and dame for many, many years. I remember seeing panto there well before your time, when a young principal boy, Susie McKenna, who went on to become artistic director at the Hackney Empire and produced fabulous pantos there as well. So it's great how that tradition is passed on, isn't it?
Absolutely. And like, Kenneth Allen Taylor was always someone that inspired me as a young boy, because he used to be watching someone that was completely in command of the show, in terms of he was having the audience eat out of his hand. Like, any joke was landing, like everyone was hilariously laughing. The show was really well thought through, really well produced, and it was just family pantomime at its best. Like you say, there's two major pantomimes in Nottingham, so when I was young I never really realised how lucky I was, but I was in a city where pantomime was thriving, and anyone you spoke to had watched one or the other, or maybe even both, and that was a really nice way to grow up. And people would always be saying, oh, one day, Graeme, you'll be up there, and it's nice to look back on that now and see it from the other side. And within my work, there's things that you learn from watching, and you take inspiration even from years and years ago, and find I loved that idea, and I'd love to develop that idea and create something new yourself within the shows that I now do.
An awful lot of competition around the Nottingham area, not just in the city. There are pantomimes outside, of course, in Newark, which you've choreographed for in recent years, but also you're only half an hour, 45 minutes away from other big cities. Leicester is a good example of that. As a performer, since you qualified and you did your training, you've done such a variety of things, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've and I love that. I love being so multifaceted within the work I do, and I think I want to keep being that way as well. So from being a performer, I worked in all varieties of shows and different styles of things, and like I say, like land-based work, tour-based work, pantomime, cruise ships, that kind of stuff. And I just think that has really set me up for success in my work now, because I've worked in a variety of entertainment genres, and that allows me to take bits from everything I've done and feel like I can create my work in the best way I can.
There are a couple of areas that you've worked in that are similar in many ways. One is pantomime, and the other is on the ships, either as a performer or as a casting associate, a choreographer or whatever, and I think the cruise industry has saved, if you like, an awful lot of the entertainment business, because as variety died and we see less variety on television these days, comedians and magicians and all sorts of other artists found the ships, and that's where they get their work, isn't it?
As well as like the ships having their big production shows, which have a resident cast on board, they also have guest entertainers that fly on. It depends which company you're on and how long the itinerary is for, but generally within their 7-day itinerary they may have 3 or 4 production shows, but then also 3 or 4 guest entertainer shows, and they can be made up from a whole variety of performers. So one evening there may be a singer, the next evening it might be a comedian, the next evening it might be a magician, the next evening it's a ventriloquist. It can be so many things, it proper is, like you say, proper variety. And I think it's a leading source of entertainment now. I think what was once described as, oh, you're very cruise ship, is kind of died. Like, there's no such thing as that, when you watch those TV programs and they say, oh, you're very cruise ship. The level of what the ships are producing now, particularly those huge lines, they are really creating some fantastic work and giving this platform to so many performers. And we know as well with pantomime, a lot of people that do pantomime are those sorts of people as well, because their talent is being a comedian as well as being an actor, or their talent is doing magic. And there's so many different talents that are brought into the genre of pantomime, and those people don't necessarily have as many platforms, say here in the UK, to work more than just the Christmas season or odd events. So having the ships, I think, is an amazing opportunity for any performer now.
In the good old days of variety at its height in this country, performers would literally go on in panto, sometimes up to Easter, and then go straight into summer season at a seaside resort. Now they go back to the ships. And in terms of the production numbers that you've spoken about, the standard is so very high. Not on all cruise lines, I'm sure, but when you see some of the reviews, they are of West End or Broadway standard.
The work I do for celebrity cruises, the budget they have put into the production shows is just incredible, and the standard is, I think it has to be seen to be believed sometimes, and they are using some of the world's best creatives. Like, we have West End choreographers that are creating some of the newest shows in the West End, creating shows for celebrity cruisers, and the same with acrobatic companies that create amazing Vegas style shows that are creating for the ship, and I just think this is incredible. And even for the point of growing theatre, because people will go on their holiday, say on a cruise ship, and the shows are within their package of the holiday, so they'll maybe go and see whatever it might be, either a production show or a variety act or something like that, and they are sparked to say, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed sitting, watching a live performance, and when I get home, I would like to continue feeling the way I felt when I watched that theatre production. And then it leads to people then wanting to go to the theatre more at home as well. So I do think there's way more to just a cruise ship production than it is at the time, if that makes sense. The what the ships are doing is really reinventing and re-sparking the excitement for theatre.
People might spend a fortune going to see a West End or Broadway musical theatre show, or they might spend a fortune to go and see a Cirque du Soleil show or any other sort of variety of shows. All of these sorts of things are available on the ships.
I think that's why they're such a popular holiday now, because you've kind of got everything. So you can go to the theatre, you can go for amazing restaurants and have wonderful food. There's so much stuff you can do, which we know in life things are so expensive. So if you wanted to go, say, down to London and watch a show, but also grab a fantastic meal and have some lovely drinks afterwards, the price tag on that is really high. And yes, okay, cruise ships aren't really cheap to go on, but the other side of it is when you work that out to have what you get, the value is so high, and it gets people again to be going to the theatre and enjoying life performance.
Let's talk about your casting consultancy work then, because that's an interesting aspect, and I mean not just for celebrity cruisers but for others as well. For those people who are actors perhaps or performers in general, what sort of things are you looking for when you're casting any of those shows?
I love doing the casting. I think it works really well with my choreography work as well. It kind of works hand in hand for me. Like, you're meeting new talent all the time. I just think it's good to be working on both roads, if that makes sense. Yeah. But what I'm looking for, I think you need to believe in yourself first, and I think that's probably one of the things that I think a lot of people don't believe they need to have when they walk into a room. If they've been called into an audition, they've already been successful because they have been called in. And I think sometimes you forget that. You go, oh, I've got auditions, I'm just going to go. But actually, if you're called in to be seen, you've obviously had something in your CV or your letter or your show reel or whatever it is that's really sparked interest with the casting team. So you've already ticked off round one, basically. So you're doing well. You've been successful. Then go in the room and be yourself and believe in who you are. Nobody wants a clone of a million people. They want to see real people with personality. And that, I think if you can really nail that and your interpretation of what you're asked to do. So, say it's a piece of choreography, say, that doesn't mean change the choreography. It means interpret it in your body and how you would perform it. And I think if you do, you really stand out. At the end of the day as well, casting is an interview, isn't it? Without the interview part, you're going and you're showing your skill set and showcasing your work. And generally the people you're going to be working with want to work with great people that are, one, talented, but also really lovely people. Like there's, everyone wants to work with people they like working with. So I think show who you are, show your personality, and if it goes wrong, it doesn't matter. Like, Like, you know, auditions are to show your potential and rehearsals are to reach them. So I think when people remember that, it allows them to perform to their best and showcase their work.
I think as well that performers learn very quickly when they've had a number of auditions, and not to get too downhearted if they don't get any particular role, because there could be any number of reasons why, and that doesn't ever possibly reflect on your talent or ability.
Absolutely. I think the casting jigsaw is so much more complex than it looks from the outside sometimes, and I think there's been so many people in different projects I've done. Even recently I've been doing a few other casting projects, and there's been some fantastic talent that just hasn't been quite right for the role, and then we've had to look further for the talent. And it's not that we haven't got talent that's been submitted, it's just they're not quite right for that casting breakdown. And I think, like you say, the further you go on through the business, I think you get it more and you start to realise. But I think it is hard to not get downtrodden on that, because you go, oh, you know, I'd be perfect for that, and I'm sure you probably would sing it or act it really well. It's more than that. It's all the ingredients put together to create the show, you know. So it's a tough world, the casting world, for auditionees, but I think the good of all the yeses you get completely outweigh the no's, don't they?
I think as well that as a performer or working in the industry in any particular area, you want to be paid properly, but it's about life experience as well. And I have to say, you've had an incredible opportunity to see the world and to do lots of things that you wouldn't necessarily have been able to do just because of the job that you do, and that's really important as well as the money, isn't it?
I try and encourage anyone that, you know, is young or they haven't got ties or anything like that, or they can, you know, they're not they haven't got a family at home where they need to be there for, like, go and see the world, do it. And you never know who you're going to meet either. There's so many people I have met along the journey that have actually now really helped me in the future in terms of, you know, either inspiring me or, you know, they're from the other side of the world, and then I've had to go over to, say, Australia and do a casting, and those people that were Australian that I met along the way have helped me with helping me where to look for talent and what to do. So I think sometimes, you know, it's great to work in the UK and do your thing here, and I think you know that's the goal for a lot of people, but to see the world with your work too and meet more and more people that you wouldn't necessarily meet here is just an amazing experience, and it's completely invaluable in what you do.
Now, the reason I asked you about what you're looking for as a casting consultant is because you've written a book, of course, and I don't know how you found the time, but 50 Tips for Audition Success is still available from Amazon, isn't it? And you do enjoy encouraging young people and new talent, don't you?
Oh, I love that. I think for me, if I can give a tiny bit of help to somebody, then I want to, you know, and if it's not helpful, then that's fine too, but I just really want to pass on maybe things that I have learnt along the way that I wish I'd known earlier. When you're sitting on an audition panel, you see so many people, like sometimes we can see, you know, 500 dancers in the space of like, you know, a day and a half, and they're all doing the same choreography, and we need like, say, 4. And I think, you know, when it comes to that situation, there's a lot more no's than yeses, and I think from being a performer, it can sometimes make you think, oh, this is just impossible, and that's not the case. And I think I just wanted to share some basically truths from behind the table, what I see, and hope it inspires and can help people with their auditions and their future success, basically. So I just decided one day, okay, I'm going to take some time and write down my thoughts, and it took me some time because initially I wrote it more as a book where it was like reading a novel, and I read the first part of it and I just thought, this doesn't feel like it rings true to the people it's going to be reading it. You know, a lot of people that read my book are generally like new graduates or people that maybe have been in the business for a couple of years and looking to maybe they've on ships and they want to try things in the UK or whatever it might be, and they're wanting to basically hear it like this, where it's just more conversational. So I started again and made it be a lot more punchier tips and just as I would say it. And I think the feedback's been fantastic on it, and I just hope it can continue to inspire and help people throughout their journeys.
And it's rewarding as well, isn't it? And you must know that from the workshops and the masterclasses that you do.
It's so rewarding. Like, you know, there's a massive part of me that loves teaching, and I think I'll always have that in me, even in years to come. I think to see talent grow, or even small things, like, you know, when you're working with someone that's maybe already gone through their training program, so that they're professional, but they come to a class and there's some little niggly bits and they're feeling maybe a certain way, like, I'm really struggling to execute this, or do whatever they need to do, and you just talk it through, and instantly you can see people calm, you can see their nerves relax, and it's just so nice then here maybe in 6 months time they've booked that job they want to do. And I think teaching's a really important part, but I also think it helps you with your creative work, because ultimately you are always working with a group of professionals, but in a rehearsal room, it's good to understand that everybody learns and works in different ways. And I think teaching allows you to be more aware of that and learn new techniques of how to explain something to a group of varying standards and varying abilities.
You've been choreographing panto for quite some time now, and for Imagine in particular. That's a different sort of challenge, isn't it? And I say that in the nicest way, because we talked about the variety of people coming together in a panto cast, which is very different to a production number on a ship or in the West End or anywhere else, because you're bringing together magicians, you're bringing together actors who may not be dancers, as well as specialist dancers in the same company, and of course young children in the juvenile chorus. That must be challenging, because you're bringing so many different levels of ability together.
I love the challenge, but yeah, it really is like, such a mixed bag, because everyone is there for what their strongest skill set is, So with obviously the children as well, there's a lot to do in a very short space of time, like getting it all done within like a 7-day period, ready for tech. It's challenging, but it's something that, I think on day one of rehearsals, I always love to just do a generic phrase, maybe like this the finale or something. We all do it, and then it kind of gets everyone to understand this is where we're at. Okay, I'm maybe pitching this too much, or these guys have got this so quickly, we can put a bit more in there and create from that way. And and I think when you've done pantomime for a long time, it becomes like a formula that people that do panto a lot say, oh, it's easy, we can just do this. But I think when you haven't done pantomime, it's actually a really hard formula, because it's something that, like you say, it's not like just putting on a production show where everyone is cast for whatever they need to do, where in a show, like you say, you're bringing so many different skills of a pantomime that you just learn kind of what works best and what order to work in, and not to overload people, and also just to reassure people. It does feel like crazy. We've got 7 days to get this done, but it's fine. It will all work out, and we'll get there. And from my side, I'm really conscious of always as well making sure the actors feel confident and look good and feel good in the movement they've got. So I like to take some time to find that, and then the children, I also want to complement the show. I want them to feel part of the show rather than them be just the children that come on. I want them to be cast members. From a choreography point of view, it's something that's also not on the page, if that makes sense. So with music, as much as there's a lot of preparation to do for the music, there is the song, and this is the song, this is what we're doing, or or if it's, say, acting, it needs to be directed, it needs to be reworked and things. However, the idea is on the page already, and then you work from it. With choreography, a lot of the time, you are walking into a rehearsal room on the first day with an idea in your brain, but it wasn't on the paper to start with. It's kind of what you've created with from reading it, and you don't fully know who's going to be doing it, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of what I call problem solving, but I think once you get through the problem solving by day 2, you're fine. I think it just takes that first day to also just give the confidence to the cast. I think as soon as the cast feel confident and know that they're in safe hands, and that the choreographer is wanting them to do their best and look great, then you're on to a winner. I think when the cast member doesn't necessarily feel like the choreographer's on their side, that's when it's a bit more difficult. But I think if you establish those relationships straight away and know that, this show's going to be great because I'm only going to be having you do stuff that you look and feel great doing, then you're fine and you're on to a winner.
I tell you what, it's very rarely a problem, because panto is all about a family. The company is a family.
Exactly.
The creatives are a family. Everybody supports each other, and that's why it works. I've got 3 final questions for you. Quick fire. First of all, what's your favourite panto title?
I think it is so many I like, but I think if I was going to have to say one, I'd say it's Cinderella. And I think it's because it's so magical and it inspires so many people. And it's one like the big, huge titled shows. And I do love that. But if I had to be really picky, I would maybe say Mother Goose, because I love Pantomime Dame. And in that show particularly, they're able to have it all to themselves because the show is all about the dame. So I do really love that. But I think if I had to go overall, I'd probably say Cinderella.
When was it not all right on the night? Have you got any memories of when things went badly wrong?
Yes, however, I think that happens. There's always a story to tell. However, the thing, like you say, the magic of Panto is it's a company, and everyone always wants the show to be the best it can be, and everyone just mucks in. And so on the night, it's always all right, if that makes sense. But leading up, there is always some of those, oh goodness, like, is this going to be ready for tomorrow? Or, oh God, this has now happened. But it always, in the end, is fine.
It is, and in Panto you can cover that because the audience are involved. They're, right from the very start, so they're well aware that things are going wrong and that you're covering, and they are as much a part of it as anybody, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's why it's fun. I really love. I love that, and pantomime is that art form that it does take those seasoned people to really understand that and be able to go, it's okay to go wrong, because it actually adds to the show sometimes. So yeah, it's always fine in the end.
Finally, what about Panto itself? Why do you love it so much? Why is it so important, do you think?
Like I said earlier in the podcast, that one of the first things I did as a child that inspired me was to go to the pantomime, and I know that a lot of families, it's the same. It's children's first introduction to theatre, and I think it's magical. It's a way of getting the family together. Some families might go to the theatre regularly throughout the year, but a lot of families, one, can't afford to, or the stuff that's on at the theatre isn't necessarily completely family friendly. So it's a show that suits all ages and all generations of people, and I just think it's a lovely way of celebrating Christmas and celebrating the theatre. And I think pantomime also allows theatres to do creative things throughout the year that they wouldn't necessarily get the opportunity to do if they hadn't done the pantomime, because the pantomime has allowed people to see the adverts for what's coming up, to get people through the door, to start loving the theatre again, and then they may go and watch other things during the year. So I do think it's a really, really important art form, and I'm sure it will go on for many more years, and I love it to pieces.
Well, listen, we know that you've worked all over the UK for Imagine so far. We're in November, we're not a million miles away from the start of rehearsals. Where are you this year?
I'm doing Aladdin at the Lyceum in Crewe.
Listen, have a fabulous Christmas, and thank you, Graeme, so much for talking to us.
Thanks, Martin. You too.
And that's it. We've run out of time again for this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the series to catch up with any episodes you've missed so far, and make sure you don't miss out in the future. Next time, I'll be taking you behind the scenes at Imagine headquarters as the pace steps up to the next Panto season, with final preparations being made to sets and costumes, and trucks literally queuing up to collect for theatres all over the UK. I'll see you next time for episode 42.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.